I'd like to talk today about the relationship between pleasure and happiness and joy, these interrelated concepts, and take a look at it from both our Christian perspective, also Buddhist perspective, and also from the perspective of a non-theist. Uh, the question that you can raise talking about happiness and joy is, of course, the question of pleasure. Uh, Certainly, pleasure is a good thing. It's something that we all want to experience. We all enjoy. It does bring joy. It does can lead to happiness. Uh, the concept from the Buddhist perspective would be to eat food. Of course, we all desire a good meal. It's nice to eat some good food, but to eat the food and enjoy the food very much, but not get overly attached to the food. So there's an interesting sequence here, right? Where we're enjoying the meal, we're enjoying the food, it's great, but the attachment is the thing that the Buddhists would question. Once you get attached to the food, there can be an issue. And certainly this also resonates within our Christian tradition in terms of fasting, in terms of penitential practices, where we can give certain things up. We certainly try to do that during the holy season of Lent. And we try to fast from certain foods, certain pleasures. And the idea is that not that the pleasures in themselves are bad, they're very good. But the problem is the over attachment to the pleasure. There is this boundary between enjoyment and greed. So, enjoying, wonderful, we should enjoy. God has given us many great gifts. There are many splendid foods. There are great chefs. There are wonderful ways of cooking and preparing food. Uh, Wonderful, great. But what happens when we become greedy, when we become gluttonous, when we just keep on going for more and more and more? Uh, and it can militate even to the enjoyment of the food. So the idea of not getting overly attached, enjoying, wonderful, but not overly attached to the pleasure. There are two types of happiness in play here, and that is the enjoyment of pleasure through the senses. And certainly the senses, again, God's gift to us, are wonderful. We have much enjoyment through the senses. We see beauty with our eyes, we hear beauty with our ears, we can taste beauty, we can speak beauty to one another, we can touch beauty, all of these great senses. But also the idea of experiencing happiness through the mind. Senses, wonderful, good, but also the importance of the mind in this whole process. For example, love. We experience love through the senses, but also, and very importantly, through our mind, through our mental attitude, through an attitude of love, an attitude of care. Another example, of course, would be compassion. Compassion, of course, very important through the senses. We give aid and comfort to somebody. We can give them food, we can give them shelter, we can give them medicines, all of these great things. But also just that compassion in reaching out to one another. The idea of being thoughtful in our compassion. Thinking of another person and putting ourselves in their place, walking in their shoes, seeing what they're experiencing, that type of compassion. So again, the mind, very important with that. And then also generosity. Generosity, certainly through the senses, very important. Meeting people's physical needs, great, wonderful, should be done. Uh, but also, and very importantly, generosity through our mind. Thinking, well, what can I do to become a more generous person? What steps can I take? How can I reach out to somebody? And sometimes the greatest gift that we give to another person is just that generosity that comes from spending time with them. I remember calling someone once, and at the end of the conversation, she was so grateful she hadn't heard from anyone in several days, and just somebody reaching out and sharing with her another human voice. Again, that generosity that comes just when we think of another person and we reach out to them with care. And how can that happen? It certainly can happen through our belief in God and the Word of God and the caring of God. Certainly our scriptures proclaim that to us. And so our belief in God can be very important in terms of reaching out to another person with generosity and compassion and love. But also for a non-theist, someone who doesn't entertain the possibility of there being a God, the training of the mind is very important. So to get that mental attitude that puts others before ourselves, that seeks generosity to another person, very, very important, very significant. When joy comes to us from the mind, another aspect, is that it can last longer. Sometimes that joy that comes from a physical pleasure, wonderful as it is and great as it is, can be very fleeting. Whereas a joy that comes from the mind, when we cultivate this attitude of joy and this compassion for the other, it can last much longer. It endures much longer. And so that type of joy that comes from that mental attitude is extremely important. And some people ask, well, how do I maintain the spirit of joy? It seems that it comes and it goes. How can I sustain it in myself, in my own personal lifestyle? One recommendation that is made is 10 to 30 minutes of meditating each day on compassion and kindness. To take time each day and actually spend that time meditating and thinking about compassion. How can I become a more compassionate person? How can I become a kinder person? Is there somebody I can reach out to? Spending that time in meditating, again, this training of the mind to have this attitude of joy.